everyone, and Happy New Year. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 200 library systems across 37 states with the goal of making author talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of our wonderful, best-selling, prize-winning, and acclaimed authors that you will hear from throughout our series year-round. Today, we are honored and excited to have New York Times bestselling author Namina Forna with us to talk about the Gilded Ones series, including her most recent book in the series, The Merciless Ones.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
And I'm not alone. I'm, with Niffy, who's being a butthole, but we're always here together.
Well, before we dive in, Namina, let me pause for one moment and give everybody that standard quick housekeeping information, and then we'll learn a little bit more about our guest. So we've compiled some viewer questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but we're also taking your additional questions throughout this conversation, the entirety of it. So if you have a direct question for Namina, you can click that questions button that's below this live stream video at any time to submit those questions. In addition, we invite you to interact with your fellow viewers in the live chat box, also located below the live stream. It's always fun to see where everybody's tuning in from, so have fun with that. If you're unable to attend the full talk for any reason, you will receive a thank you for attending email in about 24 hours. And in that email, you'll find a link to the recording. Now, to formally introduce our guest for today. Namina Forna is the New York Times bestselling author of the Gilded Ones series. She has been published in over 25 different countries and also works in film and television. She loves telling stories with fierce female leads and now lives in London, where she spends all her time trying to stay warm.
That's true. That's very true.
Well, thank you so much for being here. How are you this evening? Well, it's evening for you.
I'm good. Hi, everyone. Y'all are seeing me in like my new apartment, which is not furnished yet. So here we are.
Well, I would like to start by saying, again, thank you so much for being here. The series is so beautifully written, so enthralling, and so important. I'm a huge fan. That being said, I know there are some watching today that have not yet read The Gilded Ones or The Merciless Ones. Can you start by giving us a general summary of your work?
Sure thing. So the Gilded Ones trilogy, well, the Gilded Ones, it is a young adult fantasy. It's set in a super patriarchal world where there's a group of girls who run faster and are stronger and also bleed gold. And because of this, people think that they're monsters. But then actual monsters sort of come into this world, and the girls are given a choice: fight or die. My main character, Deka, decides to fight, and in doing so goes on this epic journey that changes her life. So that's the Gilded Ones.
That's perfect. So Amy would like to know what inspired your writing and why was telling this story important to you?
So I grew up in Sierra Leone, West Africa, and in Atlanta, Georgia, both super patriarchal places. And when I was growing up, I always had these questions. I was like, well, why are girls supposed to do this and boys don't do that? And this doesn't seem fair, right? Because I was very concerned about fairness when I was a child. And everyone would be like, that's just the way it is. That's the standard answer. That's just the way it is. And I was just like, that's not a good answer. That doesn't make any sense, right? So then I go to college, and I go to Spelman College, which is all Black and all female. And there I take women's studies classes and realize that, wow, basically everything that I've sort of been like rebelling against my entire life is a system. And if it's a system, then it's something that I can write about. So I wanted to write a book that explained what it meant to live in a patriarchal system, who suffers under it, and who suffers under it, what are the other systems that sort of buttress it. And also, with the entire trilogy, I also wanted to go farther because I think when we think in terms of feminism and patriarchy, it's very easy to be like, oh, this only affects women. And then we stop there. So I wanted to like use the trilogy as a way to sort of unfurl, how does everyone um, what happens in these sort of systems, and how does everyone um, suffer or not under it.
Mhm. Wonderful. Um, you said several very important things, and we have a lot of questions that touch on each of those things. So I can't wait to dive into that a little later on. Um, Brian would like to know, what might you share about your writing process, especially as someone who is storytelling for a global world rather than a single national state?
My process is infuriating. My process is infuriating. But also my process, I think the biggest thing I've learned is to honor the writing and everything in service to the writing. And what that means for me is learning how to truly listen to what it takes for a story to unfurl according to um, what your specific process is. You have to sort of listen to your body. So for me, what that means is it tends to take me at least a year to really think of a story, right? So initially, I'll have an idea and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so great. Oh, I want to write this. But then I'm like, no, 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 stop, because that's not how it works. I have the idea, I pitch it to people, and then and then I'm like, what do you think? Is it a good idea or not? And people tell me their opinions, but usually there's a kernel in the idea. If it's strong, I'll know, okay, yeah, this is something I want to move forward with. Once I have that, and I've spoken to people, I have different critique partners at every level of the process. My first critique partners are the people who I basically talk to. And it's really important that you speak to people, like when you're telling your story idea, speak to people who are encouraging, speak to people who don't sort of cut you off at the knees, right? So once I tell them that idea, like we sort of like brainstorm it a little bit, and then I let it sit. Usually I let it sit for about a year. And then typically almost like a year to the day that I got the idea, I'll be watching a TV show or a movie, and then the idea will come back. But only this time it'll come back sort of fully formed and fleshed out. So what I then do is then I write the outline. And I take my time sort of writing the outline. Getting it to where I want to get. Like my outlines typically are around 6 to 8 pages. And this seems like a lot, but it's actually not, because I'm just putting down what happens. Um, and when I actually write, like there's a lot of room for discovery. And if anything happens in the writing I'm like, oh, this is delicious, I just go back and change the outline to reflect that. So the outline for me is a living document.
Is the outline of all three books, or just one book at a time?
Just one book at a typically what I do is like I have an overarching outline for the trilogy. So for me, the Gilded Ones is like a thesis in 3 parts, right? So I was just like, so when I was thinking of this story, I was like, this is where I start and this is where I want, importantly, want to end. Because you never know. Like as you grow and you develop, like sometimes what you think is what the ending is might not be the ending, because by the time you come to it like a year, 2, 3 years later, you will have changed your mind or hopefully evolved as a person. So, like I have like that sort of overarching outline, but then my solid outline for each book. And once I finish the outline, I go to pages. And this is where my process gets really horrifying. I tend to spend more time on the first 2 chapters than or like usually the first 50 pages than I do the rest of the book. So I might take a month or 2 months on the first 2 chapters or 50 pages, um, than the rest of the book. And the reason for that is I used to feel very bad about it. Not used to, I still do. I feel very bad about it. But what I've realized is happening is that in those chapters, I'm laying down what the impetus is. I'm laying down the emotional state of the character and how they need to evolve. I'm laying down world. I'm laying down all of these things. Like it's very important to have the status quo, because once I have that status quo, then I can breeze through the rest of the book. Like literally, it's like once I have that, then the rest of the book doesn't like if it the first two takes 2 months, the rest of the book takes like 1 month.
Wow.
how it works for me. And that's why my process is infuriating. That's why I say everybody has their own process.
Uh-huh. So
Yeah.
how long did it take you to write the first book
The
or
guilt.
each of the books?
So the Gilded Ones, So I initially wrote the Gilded Ones in 2012. And that and when I initially wrote it, it took me about a year. And so once I finished, I went out with it and crickets. Like I got a lot of feedback of basically this is a really good story. Does she have to be black? And that was how the industry was, back in that time. And those were the expectations. But I knew the story was good. And in my mind, I was like, okay, maybe the time is not now. Maybe they're not ready. So then I set it aside and I worked on other things. But then I think it was like 2018. I saw the reception that the previews for Black Panther were getting, and I knew the time was right. So I basically wrote. I threw out what I had because by that time I'd involved as a writer, you know. So I threw out what I had, and I did a page one rewrite, and that took me a month and a half. And the reason, and I want to point this out, the reason it took me a month and a half was because I was basically about to slide into, well, I'd been in poverty, like basically since I graduated school. But like I was working this horrible clickbait job, and they were like, we're gonna lay all of you guys off in like 1 month and hire you back as freelancers. And I had just reached the point where I was just like, this is like my last this is all I have. This is it. Like if I cannot be a writer at this point, I have to let go of this dream because like I've couch surfed for years. I've been in poverty for years. Like it's either this time or law school. So that was like the mental math that I was doing. And that's why I wrote it so fast. Like I would wake up 4 3 4 5 a.m. and write like 10, 20 pages before work. Cause I was like, it has to be do or die because I don't have the strength anymore to keep writing and to keep like throwing, you know, throwing like spaghetti against a wall and it's never sticking.
Yeah.
So, and I say that because like if anybody's listening that's a writer and wants to be a writer, understand that that is a punishing piece to write. That's not actually practical. Like, I mean, if necessity do or die, I understand, but like, don't think that that's sort of a responsible thing to do to your body because it's not. Yeah.
And so the Merciless Ones then was that more smoothly written?
No. So the Merciless Ones was actually, oh my God. The just this trilogy has just it's been I feel like I've written this trilogy in a time of upheaval. Because when I wrote the Gilded Ones, when I was going through rewrites of the Gilded Ones, basically my dad passed away, my sister passed away, my brother passed away, my uncle passed away, all in 1 year.
I'm so
And
sorry.
then COVID came, right? And so then the Merciless and by the time the Merciless Ones came around, I was sort of burnt out. So that book was a slog. It was like pulling teeth. I think just for everybody, like, those 2020, 2021, those were not the years to be writing and particularly be writing, dark books because it was just painful for everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Book
Well,
three is going great though.
well, I can't wait for 3.
Yeah.
Um, so Cleopatra says, "What information was most useful for the creation of the deities in this series?" But basically expanding on that, what kind of research did you embark on for your books? Because even the fight scenes, it's like you've done all this before.
Um, well, so, with these books, they had multiple purposes. The other purpose is like because I grew up in Sierra Leone, West Africa. I would say Sierra Leone, West Africa, because people are like, Africa, we're in Africa. Like, this is my pet peeve. So I'm just like, this is where I'm from. But like, because I grew up in Sierra Leone, I grew up with an understanding of Africa as a magical place, but also as a place of a great history. When I came to America, it was very funny how like all of a sudden my my history as an African was overwritten, and all of a sudden we were like these uncivilized primitives. Like that's always the word. Like anytime you read a history book, that's always what you see.
Mhm.
But like my dad was an amateur historian. And growing up, he taught me about things like the walls of Benin. He taught me, about the ruins in Great Zimbabwe. He taught me about like the tribes who mapped the stars and all of these things. And there's a magic in that history, and that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I reflected in my work, right? Because here, like, and whenever you hear about Africa, it's just like naked people in huts, which, by the way, is very true. Like where I'm from, like Sierra Leone, like that is a part of us, right? But there's also other places, there are castles, there are all sorts of things there, but all you ever see is this one perspective.
Mhm.
So when I was writing, it was very important for me to sort of have a firm basis in that history of African civilizations and to use that in my work. So, like when I was writing, I went back and I did a lot of research just to remember that the things that my father taught me were true. So I went and I read about like all the like different African civilized pre-colonial African civilizations, and that is reflected in how I crafted Otera. The other thing that I found very useful, and I think a lot of authors will find this useful, so I always point it out. Like, there's a documentary, well, it's a speculative documentary series that I love on Netflix. It's called Alien Worlds. And basically, what it is that it illustrates each episode illustrates one scientific principle, and then at the end of the episode, they create an alien world using that scientific principle.
Hmm.
And so for me, I would watch this documentary to remind myself, oh, this is how you craft a world. These are the things that go into it. Like, oh, this is how you craft an animal. This is how you craft, like a different sort of environment. I found that very useful. Um, but also, I found anime very useful. I love violence. Attack on Titan is why I write such good scenes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, are you a secret weapons expert?
No, I just like watching really violent anime and like Deadpool. So
Uh,
yeah, that's it.
well, Ariella has kind of a comment and a question at the end. She says, librarian joining in, I love your books. I really appreciate the more realistic look, the traumatic events that Deka and the other girls went through, and the healing process from that trauma or lack thereof. I was surprised to see those scenes in a teen book, but I love the book all the more for it. I think that it would actually be encouraging to those too scared to get help elsewhere. Deka becomes so strong. Also appreciated the not instantaneous love. I recommend this series a lot to teens and lovers of fantasy. Now to my question. I noticed reading Gilded Ones that the different cultures you described in the book seemed to, in many ways, mirror the cultures we see in our world. Was that deliberate to make the
Yeah.
topics you were covering more easily relatable?
Yes. I think that I think when you create a fantasy world, one of the things that you want to do is well, at least for me, one of the things that I always want to do is I want to make it accessible. I want people to feel that they are reflected in my worlds. And so that means crafting the cultures after the ones that we already know, um, and making sure that people from all different cultures are represented in my worlds. Because growing up, I never saw myself in books, and so it was very important for me to do that for like the people who read my books. So yeah.
Beautifully done. I can picture myself in Otera. I'd probably be from the north, but no. um, okay, so let's transition a little bit into some plot theme setting questions. Veronica is asking about your creative process, I guess, other than your writing process. She asks, which Which came first for you, the characters, the plot, or the world in which they live? And how did the creation of the Gilded Ones world develop from there after you knew where to start?
That's a good question. Like, look at me think it's so funny when I think I look up and I don't know why. Hmm. So I actually think the first thing that came was actually Deka. Um, when I was in undergrad, I used to have this recurring dream, and it was of this girl wearing golden armor, and she was like walking slow motion on a battlefield. And she'd jump up into the air, and the dream would always cut out. But I knew that she was special. This dream was actually because, like, when I grew up in Sierra Leone, I grew up, sort of at the start of the Sierra Leonean Civil War, and them were not fun times, you know? So I tended to escape into fantasy and to always sort of want a hero, and this girl was, I think, a reflection of my wanting someone to save me from, like, my misery. And when I sort of discovered, feminism, and I discovered the patriarchy, um, I was like, I have this thesis. I want to explain this thing, and I have this girl in my dream. So I'm gonna put her. She is going to be my main character, and I'm gonna put her into a story. And so I think that so then the next thing that came was out of this sort of need was like the necessity for what is the storyline. I was like, well, if I am going to talk about if I'm going to talk about a patriarchal culture, I'm going to talk about girls in a patriarchal culture. And how do I explain, like, how do I explain visually what it means to live in a place like this as a woman? And I was like, oh, they bleed gold because I wanted to talk about the commodification of women, meaning like how our bodies are seen as objects to sort of buy and sell. And I thought that was the easiest visual metaphor. And so from that, like, it's just sort of unfurled. Like, I think this was a story of sort of necessity. I had something that I wanted to do, and then it just sort of built on itself. I don't know if that did that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, I think that you answered it wonderfully. You answered 2 questions, actually. There was another question about what inspired you to think about literal blood as power and wealth, and you just answered that one beautifully as well. It's a different way to think of commodity. I mean, literally, I think of how women are used as commodity just on our faces, basically, and our bodies. But yeah, very, very, very good metaphor there. I love it. So Emily says, I'm curious about the process of creating a fictionalized country. How did you approach the formation of Otera and the geography behind it? Is that done in tandem with establishing norms and cities and villages, or do you create them all separately and stitch them together? I think you partially answered that with its inspiration of home, Sierra Leone.
Yeah, so like definitely when I was creating, I think it's also partly I stitched them together, but I knew that when I wanted to create the thing that first came was Himira. And for me, because I knew that that was where most of the action was set. And so for me, I wanted to create a place that sort of reflected Sierra Leone, with the hills overlooking the ocean and like all the water going through but that also reflected Nigeria, which is where my maternal ancestors are from, and so that's why there's the walls of Himira to reflect sort of the walls of Benin. And as I sort of created this place, I just created like each village sort of based on the necessity of the story, but always having in the back of my mind that, oh, this is a world that imagines if Africa conquered the world versus vice versa. What does that look like?
Mhm. Okay. So you said that Deka is based off of a girl in golden armor that you dreamed about in undergrad. But Kelly would like to know, how did you come to create Deka's personality and development? Where were your inspirations when deciding to write her character? Um, yeah, go ahead.
It's funny, this is like the biggest difference between the original draft and the actual draft. So when I wrote Deka in 2012, I was heavily inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Awesome.
you know. So I had a girl who was already rebellious and fighting, like who came out the womb basically fighting. But then I thought about, how I grew up in Sierra Leone and also, how I grew up in Georgia. Like when girls are, it's and I think that the culture has changed now and that the new generation has changed mainly because of how easily accessible information is. But like remember, back in the 90s and 2000s when I was growing up, like information wasn't that easily accessible. So I think girls were sort of more quiet and biddable, is the word. And so I like when I went back and I looked at Deka, I was like, this is actually the truth of what it would be if you were growing up in a society like that and you didn't talk to each other, because like everyone is sort of in competition with each other because only certain women can become the pure women and get married. Um, and so I thought that Deka, as this quiet girl, submissive girl who basically obeys and like does everything that she's told. I felt that was quite accurate because that was my experience. That's how I rebelled internally and I rebelled in different ways, but I didn't rebel overtly, and the girls around me certainly did not. And so I was like, okay, let's go from that. Let's go from that sort of truth of when you don't have that support, even if you're rebelling, you're doing so quietly.
Mhm. It's interesting. Like I think at times, the way that Deka was brought up and the staying quiet and do what you're told, it's interesting to see how it spills over even in the Merciless Ones. So like at times it seems that even the people surrounding Deka, they're what truly holds her together.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes literally. So did you intend to create Deka, who's supposed to be the most powerful of them all, with these weaknesses that could potentially put them all in danger? And what was the importance of showing that emotional weakness in a key character?
Very much so, because I think one of the things that I really wanted to sort of focus on, like, and to really talk about was the fact that like the characters in the Gilded Ones and in the Merciless Ones, basically all of them have PTSD. All of them have complex PTSD. And Deka very clearly shows symptoms of PTSD. And I understand some people are like, well, no, this isn't what it is. But like I wrote her, this is one thing I will say that I put into her that is from me, like, because having grown up the way that I did, I suffer from PTSD. So like I put in some of my symptoms and some of the symptoms of other people that I know, to sort of be truthful to the fact that you don't like all of us, just because you get power doesn't mean you get better. Just because you are surrounded by people who love you does not mean you get better. It's a process and it's a slow and painful one, and you backslide and it is infuriating, and it's sometimes damaging, but it is what it is. That is the truth and that is the reality of when you have so much trauma. This is what happens. And so that's why I created her the way that I did, because honestly, it was truthful. I think I understand that with a lot of YA, with a lot of just novels in general, like the character is meant to like just forge ahead and just go on and do amazing things. But for me, that does not reflect the truth of how life is.
Mhm. And that's what's so powerful about your book is that it is so relatable and truthful. You can see it being anyone you know. Deka's relationship with her father is truly something. It was tangible and so realistically mapped. Honestly, like parents can do the worst things to their children, and children often, when confronted with the loss of the parent, they still grieve over such finality, um, inability to have closure, whatever it might be. So I thought that Deka only referring to her father as father with a capital F, was telling in the nature of the relationship and the distance between them, maybe something unattainable, but it also seemed as if she was calling him by his first name rather than the possessive of my father, or how you used infinite father, um, as a proper noun. Am I off base there? Can you talk more about this relationship and how it transpired over the two books without any huge spoilers?
Um, so this actually goes back to my childhood.
Okay.
One of the things that I saw in Sierra Leone that was like very horrifying is that a lot of and not just Sierra Leone, but like in America too, a lot of times your parents are the first people to throw you under the bus. But they throw you under the bus in such a way that you don't even know you're being thrown under the bus. And also they throw you under the bus in such a way that they don't know that they're throwing you under the bus. And that is the nature, I think, of tradition. Um, that is the nature of if you live in a society where you're supposed to do certain things and follow certain guidelines and be certain ways. People often, and this is the sad thing, is that when people are told this is the way that it must be, people often do so unquestioningly, and in doing so harm the people that they love the most, even when they don't mean to. Deka's father is very clearly abusive. He's very clearly emotionally abusive. He is a very damaging human being. But if you would look at him from the lens of his culture, he's a good father. If you would look at him from the lens of what it means to be, I guess, a man in Airfoot Village, um, he basically ticks off the things. He does what is expected of him, and that's why it's so painful, and that's why it's so horrifying. To me, Deka's relationship with her father is like basically a warning of when you are so focused on doing what you're told to do, what you're told is appropriate, what you're told this is how we do it, um, sometimes you miss like the people around you. You miss what is important, you miss the people that you love, and you damage the people that you love because you're so focused, um, on keeping up appearances and, doing what everybody else is doing, and that's, why I put in Deka's relationship with her father, because you see it all across the world where the people who actually mess up, children the most, it's not the strangers, it's not the outsiders, it's your own parents and your own family.
I'm also curious, we never learn father's name, but we do learn her mother's name. Was that another way of taking power away from the patriarchy?
I don't think I thought about it in those terms.
Okay.
It was just for me, the gulf between them was like, no matter how Deka yearned for it, like, that was a bridge, like, that was never truly going to be what she wanted, you know? And even though I'm not gonna but even though he had moments of realization, I think for me, it was like that's the part is that, like, Deka kept always wanting her father to love her, and he did love her in a way, but, like, his was a poisonous love, and that's sort of, like, one of the lessons that she had to learn is, like, what does actually love look like?
So we kind of covered this a little bit, but maybe you can fill in some gaps for Charlotte. She would like to know what makes a fierce female lead character to you? How do you balance writing characters that are strong and positive with strong and positive representation, but still human and flawed?
That's a good question. Dang it, why y'all give I have to think about this. I think that for me, I think it's easy to create a character that's very physically strong, right? That's easy. Um, but I think that's not the most compelling character because if they can barrel through everything, then, that's not an actual human being. For me, what makes, a strong female character is someone who, despite their own failings and despite their own weaknesses, continues to try. And I think that's what defines Deka, is that she continues to try. Um, for me, Deka's kindness is a strength. And I definitely think that there are other characters who aren't kind and are strong. And that's delightful too. But for me, when I was writing Deka, I wanted a character um who was always going to try to do what was right or what she thought was right, because Deka is wrong all the time. But who is always going to try to do what she thinks is right. That's for me on what makes strength. But if we're crafting characters that are strong, I think that comes from being emotionally strong. Um, or rather, you know, fighting even when their emotions get in their way.
Hmm.
I always think of Jessica Jones
Yeah.
um, as a like that for me is like one of the models of a strong female character. Like she has her demons, but she always tries to do what she thinks is right.
Hmm. So, what character do you share the most in common with? And Barbara wants to know if you have a favorite or least favorite character.
Um, I think I have there's elements of me in like basically all of them, you know. I think Deka's quietness and sort of like her weaknesses, I think are a lot of mine. Um, I want to have I have Belcaus's rage, but I want to be able to externalize it the way that she does. Like like Belcalis, like I look up to her. I'm like, one day I'll be like you.
Yeah.
I think I have Britta's loyalty to her friends and also her sense of humor. Like I too complain about my period all the time, and I complain aesthetically. Britta, like that's what I enjoy about Britta. Britta complains. Not because she's seeking solutions or anything like that. She just complains to amuse herself, and that's something that she gets from me. Um, yeah, so I think like all of them have different things that they get from me. And my favorite characters are I actually Britta and White Hands, like because they I just find them delightful. And somebody who's like rapidly coming up in my estimation right now is Lee, because he's getting his day in the sunlight, and turns out he's really funny. So I like him very much too.
I have to agree with you that some of my favorite moments that like really warm my heart the most are when Bill Callis lets down her wall and shows some vulnerability. I love it.
Yeah.
So Wandeepa, I apologize if I said that wrong, would like to know, were the abilities Deka's crew developed in the Merciless Ones inspired by the element bending in the Avatar series? If yes, how come no one developed water bending abilities? Or is that coming in the third book? And then they finish with, thank you for these beautiful books. The seamless way in which you included characters representing many different types of people who are largely ignored in mainstream storytelling, especially in the Merciless Ones, is truly heartwarming. You have given so many of us a wonderful gift. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Like honestly, like, you guys don't know how much that means to hear that, because I think I tend to, sorta hide all the time. So when I hear these things, they make me feel really good. Thank you. And I will say Britta's, quote, unquote, "earthbending," is inspired by Toph. Toph is one of my favorite characters of all time. So there's definitely that, but for the rest of them, no. Sadly, there will dang it. No, there won't be any water
A
benders.
rewrite is coming. No,
I I was just like, "Should I though?
they
Should I?"
have inspired something here.
No, but, like, I do love Toph Beifong, so that is one thing, but no, yeah, I should know, but no.
Um, Aditi is asking, how can women of color narratives support building safe spaces? How is divinity, goddesses, deities unique to expressions and practices of female collectivity?
Y'all ask such tough questions, and this is one where, how to answer this? I think with the Gilded Ones, one of the things that it is, it's sort of like a rumination on my idea or my evolving ideas of religion and spirituality. Initially, when I wrote the book in 2012, I considered myself atheist. I was just like, religion, no way, blah, it's all sucks. And I will preface this by saying, so Sierra Leone is extremely religious. We're actually a mainly Muslim country. And I grew up with a Muslim grandmother who, tried to get me to go to mosque. And of course, my parents tried to get me to go to church. So, like, literally, I've been to mosque, I've been to Catholic church, I've been to Seventh Day Adventists church, like any type of religious thing. Like that's the thing. Sierra Leoneans would be like, oh, there's God there, we're going, right? Like that's the Sierra Leonean mentality. So like growing up, I've been to like if there was like a religious practice, I had no choice but to engage in it. So by the time I was like a teenager and an adult, the minute I realized atheism was a choice, I was like, I'm claiming that. My views have evolved. I'm still not religious, but I wanted to think about what does it mean to me to be a person of faith? What does it mean to me to be a person that is spiritual, right? And I think what does that sort of say in the larger context of like the society that we live in now? And I think that in writing books like these, you get to explore these things, right? And you get to explore them in ways where if there are other people who are thinking the same thing, they can sort of um, come and speak with you about it. I'm sorry, that's my bell for some reason. I'm like, who is at the door? Door. This is yeah.
Um, so Amy is asking, did the recent Dobbs decision change how you maybe wanted to approach the patriarchy theme in this series? So since that decision was just handed down, for those who don't know, it's basically reversing Roe v. Wade. It was just handed down in June 2022. So perhaps it may influence the writing for book three.
Hmm. Um, do you guys mind if I go get my doorbell really quickly? I'm so sorry. Who is at my door at this time of the night? All right, I'll be right back. I'm sorry. That's right. Oh gosh. Well, that was a new one for me. So I think that how did this influence how did this influence the Gilded Ones and the series in general? I think it just made me more mad, honestly. I think that in writing these books, like once I saw that decision, I had to take a step back um, and actually sort of hold myself back because I just wanted to burn things to the ground. Um, but I think it also sort of made me remember why I wrote these books in the first place. Was because for me, the Gilded Ones was a warning. It was this is what happens when you live in a patriarchal society, and to see that happen in real time, I still don't even know how to quite. Hmm, I still don't even know how to quite feel about it. But I think because I'm right now in rewrites for book three, it's made me think about how I want to finish the books. And it's made me focus on sort of hopefulness. Um, because the Gilded Ones was a book of just let's burn everything to the ground. Um, I think the Merciless Ones was a book, let's crack open all the emotions. But I think this new book is a book of let's have some hope, because I mean we've already burnt and we've already mourned and we've already done all of these things. So I think with this new book, I'm trying to engage in a space that is hopeful and loving, and sort of crafting, I guess, more of a solution for the future rather than let's just burn everything.
Mhm.
Don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. I think it does. The answer is yes.
But
um,
I'm still very pissed though. Like I like when I tell you, once I saw that decision, I just laid in bed the whole day and I was just like, I don't know what to do with myself.
well, you moved to London.
Oh yes, actually. No, I did. Like when I tell you my paper, I was just like, "Oof, it's time."
Susan would like to know what made you choose young adults for your audience.
I've always wanted to write in the children's space, not just young adult, middle grade as well. Because I feel like younger people are more open, I think. There's a more willingness to engage in the imagination, um, and to sort of explore the world. And I wanted to be there, reaching out my hand when they're getting in the process of exploring. I think the other thing is that, so again, growing up in not the best circumstances, I spend a lot of time engaged in escapism. And so for me, my safe places were books, right? So it was books, it was TV shows, it was movies. I did not like to engage with the real world at all. And so for basically, I write for basically people like that, people who maybe find it difficult to engage with the world, and maybe don't enjoy engaging with the world and have not had a good experience engaging with the world. So I guess I write to say, hey, if you are having a hard time and you're not enjoying yourself, you can like you can come to my world. It's a violent space, but it's a safe space for you. Come on in and hide in here as long as you want. And when you're ready to go back out, you can go back out. That's why I write.
Beautiful. Thank you for doing that. Emily is asking, in August 2022, you made a TikTok discussing how media centered around Black trauma makes people less inclined to aspire toward Blackness. Could you talk about how we engage with Black media more thoughtfully with this in mind?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a great question. So basically the TikTok in question, what I was talking about is that one of the demands, and you'll notice this in publishing of Black writers, is that we must like, in order for us to get like a deal, in order for us, like, there's always this sort of subtle push of you must write something traumatic, right? You must engage in either it is the trauma of being Black, like racism, this, that, and the other. But what that does, is that it ensures that people don't enjoy being in Black worlds, right? Because if you know that whenever you go into a world, all you're going to experience is heaviness, you don't want to engage. And also it's not aspirational, right? Like, if we look at media that is aspirational, it's stuff where it's like it's fantastical. There's princesses, or there's dragons, there's this, that, and the other. But I think with Black media in general, there's always, you can have all that, but at the end of the day, it always has to be the pain. And so if you are a person in publishing, or if you are a gatekeeper, and especially librarians, like you guys are the people you're the champions of the book world. You are, the entree for so many people. I think one of the things is allowing Black media that doesn't have any of this. Like, let us be allowed our princesses. Let us be allowed our mermaids. Let us be allowed and mermaids without like, and make no mistake, like there is space and there is a necessity for the trauma books, right? Because a lot of times if we don't say it, nobody knows. But let us be allowed all the other things and let's get deals for all the other things. So especially if you're in publishing and you are a gatekeeper, you're an agent, you're an editor or whatever. If a black writer comes to you and they just have like a standard ass romance, standard, let them have that let us have that romance because, you know, if all we see is trauma, like that's all we like what we see is what we expect out of life. So, yeah, that's my podium. Is that you stand on your whatever. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The lectern is the tabletop.
Yes.
Um, this person didn't leave their name, but they are asking, are you surprised that more adults are reading your books as opposed to your intended readers, young adults? I don't know if that's true, but I know a lot of adults are reading your books.
Nope. Because like the Gilded Ones could very easily be a crossover. Um, although I was like marketed and as young adult. No, I'm not surprised. I think I think just in general, like people are always like young adult and middle grade is just for adults. What are you talking about? Like all I read is middle grade and young adult. Like, so if I'm like this way, like all I watch is cartoons. If I'm this way, I assume everybody else is this way, right? You might not say it. You might, stuff your book in your, but like, listen, this is all I ever read and watch and engage in. So, and I think that like for adults, like you want escapism. Like, there's space for the 800-page fantasy books, but I mean, sometimes you want the 400-page fantasy book where there's like a insta romance.
And sometimes there's not time or energy for the 800-page fantasy book.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I see a book like that and I start hyperventilating. I'm like, yeah.
So Barbara would like to know, what message do you wish readers to take away after reading your books?
Mm. I think for me, the biggest message is don't ever allow anybody else to define you. Only you have the power to define yourself. And when you find yourself in the presence of people who want to define you, consider why. I think it's that simple. You are the only you. You hold yourself. You define yourself.
So what tips do you have for new writers? Susan says, have you received any writing advice over the years that really resonated with you that you'd like to share with others?
Yeah. Find your community. Find your writing community. I think that's the most important thing. Like when I leveled up as a writer was when I found my writing community. But also the other thing is claim your writing because a lot of people be like, "Oh, I'm an aspiring writer." You write? Like, do you put pen to paper? Do you scribble? Then you're a writer, A lot of times people like are hesitant to do that, but like naming yourself is very important because that then sends an intention into the universe. So name yourself and find your community. Because like I used to think I was okay, no, I am very weird. It is what it is. It's part of the course. But I used to think I was very strange. And then I moved to LA and was like, oh, I'm not strange. I'm an artist. So find your community. I think that's the most important thing. And also find writers who you aspire to like when you have critique partners. Um, like have them be a writer that you can level up to, right? So like for instance, my critique partner PJ Schweitzer, she writes the Horse and Bullwinkle series, which is a very delightful series about like a dog and a pig. She's a master of emotion. I, on the other hand, when I write a book, my first draft is always action, no emotion, and then I write emotion. And so I'm leveling up to get to her, and she's leveling up to get to me in terms of action. And that's how we balance each other out to find the people who inspire you to do better. The other thing that I would say, and this is really important because it's something that I've sort of learned, and I'm starting to harp on it. I think a lot of times as writers, we punish ourselves if we're not writing. We think, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to write. Only you have your writing process, no matter how messed up it is, because y'all heard mine. Uh, honor your writing process. But the second thing that I would say um, is also look at me losing my train of thought. It's honor your writing process. Dang it. And I forgot the second thing. I'll get back to it.
Well, maybe this will jog your memory. Can you be specific about how you find your community? Do you go to writing workshops? How do you meet your writing community?
Twitter. Twitter.
Okay.
Pre Elon Musk and all of this nonsense, which by the way, like I don't know, like I've been off of Twitter for like 2 months because it got very sort of wild towards the end of the year there. But like honestly, Twitter is where I found most of my really strong writing network, or Twitter writing contests. Just like go hashtag I'm writing and just see who pops up and see who comments and exchange stuff and go from there. That's a huge way to find your community. Um, Also, I used to go to my local what is I forgot what it's called. Like I used to Society of Children's Writers, I think it's called. I forgot what it's called anyway. But I used to go to stuff like that and I'd find critique partners based off of that.
Okay.
So yeah. Meetups too.
Okay.
Why am I blanking on that, man? It's dinner time. That's what it is.
Well, yeah, it's late for you. So we've had a lot of people talk about or ask questions about the movie.
Mhm.
So you're writing the script for it, correct?
So, I wrote the first draft for it. I'm being rewritten, and it is a delightful thing. I can't tell y'all about the writer yet, but like it's really cool because it's a writer that I've sort of like really looked up to. And it's also really weird because like when you see somebody else take on your work and that like I didn't realize how awful I was in terms of killing people until they rewrote me. And I was like, I'm not that bad. They were like, Namina. So they're working on it. And I'm just sort of being like, let me know when it's done. Cause I'm on to other stuff right now.
Has it been cast and have they started filming yet?
No, they have not.
So do you have a person in mind, Allie would like to know, that you envision playing the role of Deka?
Honestly, I think depending on when the movie gets made, like for me, there's no point in mentally casting Deka, just because given. So this is the thing. Like I've worked in Hollywood for quite some time, so I'm a bit cynical about Hollywood. So I'm like, I'm like the movie's getting made, but I also know that sometimes movies take years to get made, and that's just a function of Hollywood. So I'm just like, man, y'all tell me when y'all are ready. Y'all will inform me, and then I'll inform people.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, tap me when y'all are done. That is sort of my attitude, so as to not be driven mad by the whims of Hollywood. Like I currently have like a couple of projects going through the pipeline. So it's like it's a roller coaster. And so I tend to now my thing is like, man, y'all just inform me when there's updates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about just for a minute the beautiful covers of your books? Um, they're absolutely gorgeous. Did you have a hand in any of the design, or was this a publishing house connection?
This was a publishing house. Like, so my original editor, Kelsey, was just like, I know this artist. His name is Johnny Tarajosu. He's excellent. And I looked at his stuff and I was like, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." She's like, nah, I'm gonna. And so he went and did his magic and came back with and I basically had no notes. I was like, what am I gonna say? This is What do I like? Clearly, I know nothing. So it was one of those where it was like, shut your mouth and eat your food because the food is great.
Mhm.
So I'm very happy with my covers. I think that they're beautiful and he does an amazing job. And, thank you to everyone who worked on it
They
because,
are absolutely gorgeous.
yeah.
So the question that we love to close with is,
Mm.
who are your favorite authors, or who would you recommend that our viewers run to the library and check out right now?
Hmm. So let's see. I have, okay. So, right now I'm in love with Jordan Ifueko. I've been in love with her for years. She's an amazingly talented writer. Her work is just like gorgeous and voluptuous. I love Farida. She wrote Ace of Spades, gorgeous work. I also love Natasha Bowen. She wrote Skin of the Sea, really amazing. Um, like um, The Sunbearer Trials is one of those books that I read where the world was just fantastic and lush and just beautiful. So that's a book that I'm in love with right now. Um, I'm really excited for Emily Wen Zhao's book that's like coming out. This is it out today? Dang it, I need to go. Yeah, but like her work is just like really, really amazing. Hmm. And like for my OG writers that I've always loved, Stephen King. Um, so let me tell y'all, I read Christine when I was like 13. And this is how silly I am. After reading that book, I like rushed to my bed and put my feet up because I thought a murderous car was going to come up from under my bed and get me.
I have my own Christine story.
I was just but of course, and then I think my final and by the way, I have this weird thing when people ask me people's names or names of things, I then forget it. Um, but one of my favorite authors of all time, and for some reason I'm not clicking on his name right now, wrote the great one of my favorite books of all time is The Graveyard Book. Um, you know, and so dang it, what's his name? Um, he also wrote The Sandman. Help me out here. Somebody help me. Like, no, I'm telling y'all, this is a real thing, and I feel so ashamed about it when I'm like, I can't remember the name. But like The Sandman, come on, someone in the comments. Y'all know who I'm talking
Waiting for
about.
the comments to come in.
I'm waiting for the comment. You know what? I'm just gonna go online. Neil Gaiman. I didn't even type it in.
Oh,
I was like, wait a second, why did Neil Gaiman's my
yeah.
and then now I just feel ashamed. So I'm just gonna
I have
like
that one too.
and be like, look at me just embarrassing myself on the internet. Y'all didn't even help me. Like I was like searching these comments, like, oh, thank you, Frederick. Frederick was like Neil Gaiman. Thank you.
It
And
says everyone is coming in.
now y'all want to comment after
There's like a 30
I
second delay. So they were probably commenting the whole time. So, okay. So we're past the top of the hour. I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly been a pleasure to speak with you about your beautiful and important work. And I cannot wait for the third book to come out. You said that it was in edits now. So we can look forward to that, maybe a 2023 book. Oh, okay. All right. So, also, I want to extend a huge thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in to our author talk today. Without your support, none of this would be possible, and we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, below the live stream video, you can find a link to Namina's books. We look forward to seeing you all on January 17th when we chat with best-selling decluttering and organization expert Dana K. White about her books Decluttering at the Speed of Life and Organizing for the Rest of Us. And again on January 31st when we speak to the creator of the webcomic XKCD about his newest book, Randall Monroe, sorry, about his newest book, What If 2 Additional Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions. You can register for these and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I am Brandon Adler, and thank you for joining us.